What is going down, ladies and gentlemen? Shout out the SDS. We've got Jordan Elliott of Niners Nation in the building. How are we doing today, Jordan?
I'm doing pretty good. I think I might have hand fatigue. I've been writing a lot of articles lately, so all the typing's been catching up to me, and I think I've been, self-diagnosed with finger fatigue from typing so much.
I think 49ers fans at this point damn near have off-season fatigue when it comes to talking points surrounding the quarterback position. But obviously, whole lots to talk about in regards to that situation. Jordan and I will discuss arm fatigue, off-season fatigue, and as we came to conclusion yesterday, stream fatigue is even a real thing. But first, before we get into it, drop an SDS in the chat. I hope you guys are having a phenomenal Friday. Before we get into kind of the quarterback situation, we'll have plenty of time to talk about this continued concept of arm fatigue. I want to talk a little bit about your thoughts on seeing Trent Williams getting that 99 overall rating in Madden. Now, it's a video game. We understand. But do you see that as a significant kind of acknowledgement of just how good Trent Williams really is?
Yeah, and I also see it as like a long time coming, and like Madden finally coming to their senses and realizing that like offensive linemen are an integral part of the sport of football. And if you're going to put 99s at wide receiver, defensive back, quarterback, running all these other positions, like why is it taking this long for it to happen with an offensive lineman? Like, no offense to Trent Williams, who's obviously very deserving. Not to take away from his accomplishment, but like guys like Joe Thomas, Larry Allen, Jonathan Ogg, like there's been plenty of offensive linemen you could argue deserved a 99 overall ranking. So I'm glad that Trent Williams is kind of pioneering what hopefully will be the respect that has long been deserving for offensive linemen. So again, I don't want to take away from Trent Williams. It's just shocking that it took this long for it to happen. But you could also argue that Trent Williams was so good last season that it was like they didn't have a choice anymore. Like they would, be very hard-pressed to come up with a rating other than 99 for the way that Trent Williams played. And, like I've been talking a lot this offseason, like people always jump to quarterbacks when they talk about like the best players in the league. I would say quarterbacks are the most important position in the league, obviously. But like if we're talking strictly just best football players, like most talented, most impactful, like I think Aaron Donald and Trent Williams are like 1A and 1B. And Aaron Donald's obviously deserving of the 99 ranking, which I've had Madden in a couple of years. I'm assuming he's a 99 overall. So if you're going to give it to Aaron Donald, give it to the guys on the other side of the ball in the trenches too. I'm glad Trent Williams finally got the recognition he deserved, because I can make a very strong argument. He is the best player in football, if not like right behind the best in Aaron Donald.
Absolutely. And I love the point about just putting respect, I feel like, on the position as a whole, because the fact that, yes, Trent Williams is a phenomenal player. You guys know that I'm very, very high on Trent and what he brings to not only the 49ers, but just the offensive line position in general. It is a little bit disrespectful in the sense that there have been other phenomenal offensive linemen who have come before him. Joe Thomas, perfect example with the Browns, Larry Allen, all those different types of guys, even Tyron Smith with the Cowboys in his heyday. He was legendary. He's obviously kind of taking a step towards his decline, but at a certain point, I thought he could have been a 99. So it is nice to see that Trent Williams is getting the recognition because, to your point, right? Literally, you couldn't have turned in a better year than Trent Williams did last year. The way he played was phenomenal. So with that, do you see Trent Williams being able to replicate what he did last year for this season?
I mean, like, yeah, of course he's capable of doing it, but I don't think it's like a slight if he doesn't. Like, I think it's always so funny that like these guys put these great seasons out there and then they're like held to that standard. Like when you have like an all-time season, like, yeah, hey, if you can do it again, like great. And I wouldn't put it past Trent Williams to do it, but he can still have a like tremendous season next year and still be the best offensive lineman in football. And it still might be a slight regression from last year because that's how good he was last year. And I don't think that should take away from his, just pedigree as a player. Like, perfect example, like Fred Warner had one of the best seasons I've seen from a linebacker in the modern era in 2020. Like, what he did in coverage, what he did just as a whole for that team, especially with the added responsibility and the lack of, not having a Nick Bosa and having a little bit more on your plate because of the lack of the pass rush that you're normally accustomed to, I thought was fantastic. And then in 2021, I thought he had a really good year too, but because it was so different from the high bar he had set the year before, it was like there were these discussions I'm seeing floating around, like, is Fred Warner struggling? Is he not the same player? It's like, no, he just was so good and the bar was set so high that you can't expect that to be what you're going to get every single season. It's extremely hard to have that kind of consistency at that level in the NFL. It's really hard to just be a good player in the NFL. So I think Trent Williams, like, I'm not expecting him to do exactly what he did last year, but I still think he's going to be the best offensive lineman in football. And I don't see that changing for a couple seasons.
Yeah, Trent Williams just feels like he is on a different level at this point, and think he'll continue to progress forward. I don't know, Jordan, if you happen to see the comments from Jimmie Ward yesterday on his story. I just wanted to get your thoughts kind of on the thought process that it feels like Jimmie Ward still is having a hard time gaining and garnering certain levels of respect from the 49ers fan base. And I just wanted to get your overall thoughts on Jimmie Ward, what you think of him as a player, his talent, and where he should be kind of ranked kind of across the league.
So I've been thinking about something for a couple days, and I feel like this is like the perfect place to just let it rip and get it out there. So I posted on my Twitter the other day for anybody who follows me that, like, I love having discussions about Jimmie Ward because I think that it really it really tends to highlight who is actually paying attention on Sundays when the 49ers are playing football. And again, I hate when people throw the word like casual around, or they go, "Oh, you're just a casual, you don't understand." Because I think there's plenty of people who don't really they watch football just to relax and hang out. Like, they don't want to sit there and grind tape. They don't want to sit there and do all the intricate things that go into really, expanding your knowledge in the game of football. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is where I'm at, though. If you want to have strong opinions and you want to be loud with your strong opinions, then you better be ready to match the energy of somebody who is putting in the time. And that's where I don't think it's fair for a lot of people who want to have a casual work ethic when it comes to understanding the sport of football, yet they want to be the loudest voices calling players overrated or saying they're not good or saying that they don't do certain things on the field. Again, if you want to just hang out and watch football, that's totally fine, but keep those loud opinions to yourself, because the second you put that kind of stuff out there, the people who are paying attention are going to destroy you. And that's literally what we see time and time again. So Jimmie Ward's like the perfect example of it, right? I think the biggest thing that I always see, the biggest criticism is, oh, they don't force enough turnovers, or they don't get enough interceptions, or this or that. Turnovers are so luck dependent, and they are so dependent on so many different variables, which is why you see such little turnover from year to year with any kind of consistency when it comes to turnovers. So for a guy like Jimmie Ward, like, the thing I always come back to is, if you're going to force an interception or you're going to come, forcing turnovers, the ball has to be in your general vicinity. And if anybody's paid attention to the way Jimmie Ward plays the sport of football and the way he covers that back end, the way he matches up with tight ends and guys in the slot, he is clamping guys, and generally speaking, quarterbacks aren't throwing the ball his way. So it's almost like people are punishing Jimmie Ward for not producing interceptions because his coverage skills are so elite that quarterbacks generally are not throwing the football in his direction when he's the nearest defender or when he's matched up in man coverage. So I personally think that Jimmie Ward is a top 5 safety in the NFL. There are not 5 safeties in the NFL that I would pick on my football team today ahead of Jimmie Ward. And I think that that's something that when you talk about it, maybe with somebody from another fan base, they might not understand the depth of that. I had a discussion with a guy who covers the Seahawks about it last year, and that was one area he gave me pushback when we were comparing rosters. And I'm like, hey, man, I promise you, if you sit there and you really grind the tape and you watch what Jimmie Ward is asked to do, you watch how consistent he is in the box, doesn't miss tackles, fits the run game very well, is able to, again, match up with a guy like Cooper Kupp in the slot, able to match up with tight ends in the slot, able to line up with tight ends in line, play that deep third. He does literally everything, and he does it all at such a high level that the only argument that people really ever have, again, comes back to, well, he doesn't produce turnovers. I literally could sit here and pull together a clip of all the turnovers that were forced last year, and it would blow your mind how many of them were tipped balls, quarterbacks making errant passes into areas of the field they shouldn't. Like, so many things that have absolutely nothing to do with the individual play of a defensive back. So I just think it's absurd that for years that's been the pushback. And again, like, it was the same arguments that I had with people about Jaquiski Tartt that I had for years, where it's like, these two were the starting safeties for the better part of a decade. And no matter who came in, they didn't get pushed out of those starting jobs. And I think that kind of in itself should tell you how good they are at their jobs and how important they are to this team. And for anybody who still has any, lingering doubts about that, go watch that Arizona game where Colt McCoy started, DeAndre Hopkins didn't play, and both of the 49ers starting safeties were out. And you go tell me what you see, because I can tell you what I saw. I saw a ton of missed tackles, a ton of confusion on the back end, and honestly a game where if either one of those starting safeties plays, I don't think the 49ers lose, let alone lose by double digits. So they're just – Jimmie Ward is, again, one of the top 5 safeties in the entire NFL, and he deserves the respect of that. And if you can't see that, then I don't know what else I can tell you. You're all entitled to your own opinions, but I'm not going to waste time arguing with somebody whose only argument is he doesn't get enough interceptions, so I don't think he's good.
I love that the way you ended that, because you hear a lot of the same things about Trent Williams. You hear it from even 49er fans. Like, I've had a couple people in the comments the last couple days. They literally preface their fandom. Hey, I'm a 49er fan, but Trent Williams holds all the time. So is he that good? And it's like, what are we talking about here? There's holding on every single play in the trenches, in the offensive line. So the fact that just because he gets a penalty here or there somehow diminishes his importance. And you can make the same argument about Jimmie Ward. He doesn't get enough interceptions, therefore diminishes his overall value, importance to the entire defense, because like you watch the tape, you put it on and that dude is clamping tight ends. He's clamping slots if he needs to. He's playing wherever they need him, and he rarely misses tackles. And that is one of the biggest benefits that he provides, is that he is a true safety. He is the last line of defense on that defense. And if it's him one-on-one in the open field, it is rare that he will get beat. It's not like it doesn't happen. He's talked about, for example, the Detroit game where I think it was Swift and him were one-on-one in the open field. I think 3 times he made 2 tackles. One of them, Swift got the better of him. But overall, like, Ward he's clamps. Like, whether it's in the run game, whether it's in coverage, whether it's guarding the top tight end talent, Ward he's all over the place. So the notion that just because, and I think you can also make the counterpoint to maybe about like Trayvon Diggs and how much hype he got for the interceptions, but on the flip side, he gave up a lot of yards. And you could even point back to the 49ers game when he was getting cooked by Ayuk, right? So it comes down to almost perception, right? Who's really watching and paying attention, analyzing and tracking versus what does the stat sheet say, right? That's kind of what it feels like when it comes to the conversation around Jimmie Ward, would you say?
Yeah, and again, it comes back to just like, hey, if you don't want to invest the time watching game, like, dude, I was up last night till like 1:30 in the morning watching the 49ers Rams game from week 10 last year, and I enjoyed doing it. Like, that's part of why, like, this is what I like to do. But like, if you don't want to spend the time doing that and educate yourself and form a more educated opinion, then keep your loud opinions to yourself. Otherwise, all you're going to do is expose your own lack of understanding. And again, like, I'm not here to tell anybody else how to think or how to have their own opinions. But when you get around people that actually really, are putting in the time, your opinion is going to fall on deaf ears, because again, it's very clear to anybody who's paying even just a tiny bit of attention to what Jimmie Ward has done the last couple of years, how important he is to that defense and how good he is and how much the 49ers missed him when he was out.
And yeah, so Jimmie Ward deserves more respect than he gets. I think within the last 2 years, I think you could agree, he was like just disrespected by almost the entire fan base. And since the 2019 year, he also flirted in free agency, almost signed with the Raiders for more, comes back to the Niners for less. doesn't necessarily, I don't think he plays the style that he would necessarily want to play, right? Like he kind of does what the 49ers ask him to do, but I think he feels, and I think you would agree as well, that there is another level to his game where if they let him freestyle a little bit, let him roam in that backfield, read the quarterback, maybe then based on that situation, more interceptions would come and more big plays would come that way. Would you say that could be an accurate thought process?
I mean, yeah, like a lot of it does come down to scheming too, but like at the end of the day, it's like interceptions are so dependent on outside factors, right? Like, so we didn't have interceptions for years and people complained about it. And then that Monday night game, which I actually went to with Brad last year, he gets 2 in like 15 minutes. Yeah. And it was because Tyler Higbee dropped a ball on a screen pass. And then Matt Stafford just put a ball in a terrible spot when he was trying to take, I think it was like a deep post to Odell Beckham. Both things that as much as Jimmie Ward made the play on the ball, which is half the battle, aren't possible without the outside factors that, again, come into play here. So I think that, again, at the end of the day, Game Pass is available to everybody. If you want to go and further your, get a more educated opinion on
is
stuff.
Game Pass working? First of all,
honestly, I shouldn't say it's available to any because it's a broken product. But right. There's enough out there if you really want to spend the time to further enhance your, again, understanding of what a guy like Jimmie Ward might do outside of a stat sheet. Because again, like I'm open for any arguments that people, want to throw out there for why they don't think he's good. Because I could sit here, I have a ton archived. I have all these cut-ups of him clamping other teams' wide receiver ones, lining up with tight ends, playing the deep third, fitting the, like he does everything. And he not only does everything, he does everything at a very high level. And again, it comes back to one of those situations where it's like, it's so underappreciated just because there's not the flashy, interceptions, or there's not like a big hit
or the big PBUs, right? Because a function of what Ward is doing is he's playing such good coverage that they don't throw his way. So that's a win from if you're sitting in those defensive meeting rooms and they're rewinding the tape, they're pointing out Ward and like, look at Ward. He did his job. He took away either the primary or the secondary, and that translated into maybe a off timing situation here, maybe a coverage sack, something along those lines. But that won't come across unless you really dive into it. It would just look like, oh, this is a sack, or like, oh, good job by Bosa getting around the edge and beating his guy, when in reality, the timing is to bang it onto the tight end, and there's Ward right there in coverage, playing his role and his responsibility. Well, that's a win in the meeting room, but to maybe, the average fan just watching on Sundays, drinking a cold one, you're not going to see that. Like, that's not going to register as like, oh, this is a guy doing his job at a high level. It's you see it from the context of, oh, well, Bosa got the sack, right? Or this guy got the play, or they just didn't throw that direction without really understanding the true context.
Yeah, and like, again, this is where it comes back to, like, dude, if you're one of those people that just like, hey, I just like drinking beer and watching football, I really don't care, I want to see touchdowns and sacks and big plays, like, I respect that, man. Like, that's part of the joy of watching sports, man. Like, I totally understand that, but that's where it comes back to, if you want to have that kind of outlook on things, then when you have loud opinions about a certain player, that's why a player like Jimmie Ward is going to get upset, because again, the people who actually are putting in the time to do this stuff know what he brings to the table. And then when somebody who's opting to be very casual with their own, time that they're investing into understanding the 49ers and understanding the players on the team, that's where it comes off as insulting to them. And the best way I can put it is, if somebody came into your job that had no idea about what your profession is and they had loud opinions about you, you probably wouldn't like it too. Sure, there's some people where they might just not care. Like, I don't care. I know I'm good at my job. But it's a little different for these guys where they have to see it on social media by the hundreds, by the thousands. And they have people coming in that don't know anything about what they do on a day-to-day basis and what they bring to the table, telling them that they're worthless, or telling them to leave town, and telling them they're not worth the money that they clearly deserve. And I just think that if the shoe was on the other foot, people might understand where a player like Jimmie Ward is coming from, feeling that disrespect,
Yeah, of course, but we understand they're $1 million athletes. They make millions, so who cares, right? Like, if they're getting chirped, that's definitely a thought process of some of the fan base. I guess my biggest thing with that concept is, I think, like, whether you agree or disagree with any of this, it is crystal clear that the fans, or not the fans, the players see what you're saying. And they're clearly a continued pattern of them just not being happy with the continuous chirping, if you will, from the fan base. But hey, it comes with the territory. We understand what it is. It's professional sports. You're going to get chirped no matter what. Um, so I think ultimately, though, we both agree that Jimmie Ward is, I guess we would say he's underrated, right? Because we have him rated. We have him proportionately highly rated in the way that we both view him, his importance to the defense, the success that the 49ers have seen on defense in 2019, in 2020. I believe they were top 5 units statistically in 2020, even though the record didn't show that. And then even last year when the defense was keeping the 49ers in games and contributing to them making a playoff run. Without that defense, the 49ers aren't in the playoffs because it was often that the offense was having to catch up or get into gear later on in games, and the defense had to hold, bend, but don't break. Jimmie Ward was a huge part of that, especially when you look at the outside cornerbacks. If Emmanuel Mosley was out, if you had Dre Kirkpatrick or you had Josh Norman or one of these other cornerbacks out there, Ambry, when he was first getting his go, they relied a lot on the middle field guys, whether it was the safeties or linebackers, to really pick up a lot of the slack in coverage. And that goes unnoticed, right?
Yeah, like there was a play like I was watching last night. It was like a 3rd and 8 or something like that, and lost. It was against the Rams, Week 10, and the Rams went completely empty. They kicked their tailback out far; it was way out wide, and Ward was matched up, I think, with Higbee on the slot, and they tried to run a quick little in-cutting route over the middle, and Stafford immediately had to come off of that read because of how quickly, just off the line of scrimmage, Jimmie Ward locked up. It's not Darren Waller, George Kittle, or Travis Kelce, but Higbee's a decent tight end in the NFL.
And he's got great athletic traits.
Yeah, there's not a ton of safeties that are doing that in press man coverage at the line of scrimmage against the safety like that. But again, the ball. So this is what happens: is that he goes back to his other read, and then I think we talked about this the other night, pretty late. Hufanga ends up breaking on the ball and made a great play to come in and break up. They were trying to run like a little natural rub route and get, I think it was Henderson, the running back, open on a quick little slant underneath. And Hufanga ends up breaking up the play, which he deserves the credit for. But what doesn't get talked about, because Hufanga ends up making the play, is that the only reason Stafford's coming off the primary read is because of the coverage that Jimmie Ward has. So the way I look at it in that instance is that, hey, well, if that's what probably will be the 49ers starting safety duo this year, you have to feel pretty good if they're able to have that symbiotic relationship where something that Jimmie Ward does really well is then leading to Hufanga being able to make a play on a ball, and you have both your safeties having a big impact. The problem is if you're just watching that quick, and again, this isn't just, a slight at anybody who's not watching game film. This is like, if you're watching on the broadcast angle, you're probably not going to notice what Jimmie Ward did right away. I had to go back and watch that play 3 or 4 times to really fully understand the impact he had on it. So again, that's where it comes back to my original point of, if you want to have a very strong opinion and say that the player is overrated or they're not good or they're not worth the money, I would highly recommend that you at least put in the time to construct an argument that's going to hold weight with the people who are putting in the time. Because if you don't, it's just going to come across to somebody like Jimmie Ward as disrespect, which is why I think that he felt the way he did, and I can't really blame him for it, if that makes sense.
Of course. And I mean, he even went as far to commenting on, some of the posts on this particular Facebook page where
he's on all right, I don't know about that, man. He's on Facebook. That's wild. That's wild.
My guy's on Facebook, like, getting all hot and bothered. But hey, I mean, I get it. Jimmie he is not afraid to speak his mind and speak his context, because I think when we even look at, Kowalski and kind of his maturation process, these guys are part of that kind of, I don't know, lack of a better word, old school social mentality. Like when you just kind of sit back and you just listen, you don't say a whole lot, you let people run and talk with whatever narratives. But I think both of these guys have saw that, like, wait a second, we have just as much right to come out and defend ourselves for people, like you can see in this particular comment. he's providing the context. He's providing, like, listen, man, like, you can go and run and say whatever you want, but this is the context. And so get it right. So I think that's also too kind of like what you're talking about. Like, there's going to be a lot of discourse amongst fans. You're going to get every level of type of fan, the casual, the diehard, the film junkie, all have different context based on the way and they interpret film, they interpret scheme, they interpret responsibility on the field. So that translates into maybe a player seeing it and be like, you know what? You guys aren't seeing it right. I mean, even I think Jimmie right here says, like, not to mention, I'm a free safety. I was a strong safety in college in a quarters defense, essentially saying, like, I'm still kind of out of position from what I like and feel most confident in. Doesn't mean I can't execute my job and my responsibilities based on transitioning apparently from free to strong, but it is what it is, right? It's just par for the course and just interesting because I think overall, though, you and we have a high opinion of Jimmie Ward, his importance to the defense and really what he brings to the table. Coach, appreciate you, my boy. Legend says, outside of Bosa, Jimmie Ward is the only player on defense we can't afford to lose. He's the only reason I'm not concerned about Huff. Not a bad point. I think, we saw things on tape from, Hufanga where I think, he was a rookie grasping the scheme, grasping NFL speed for the first time, and playing next to Jimmie Ward brings a level of confidence. And, you look into the future, and if Jimmie Ward is truly going to test free agency, well, you're like, well, who's going to fill in for Jimmie Ward? Because it feels like Hufanga is filling in for Kwaski. And so I kind of feel what Coach is saying. What are your thoughts on kind of what he's saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, it makes sense because, like, people go, oh, what about Fred Warner? Fred Warner's fantastic, but they also have Azeez Al-Shaair, who's incredible himself. Dre Greenlaw is good. Like, they have some good contingency plans there. Even with Bosa, like, I'm not saying that they can absorb the loss of Nick Bosa, but they had a top 5 defense when he missed the majority of the season in 2020. Like, if you take out the longest tenured member of that secondary who's been one of the most reliable, I don't know that they could really absorb that loss. And again, I urge anybody who has the ability to go back and watch it. I don't know if it's available on like YouTube or if anybody's, has it on their DVR, go back and watch that Arizona game from week 9 last year when Jimmie Ward didn't play. And it really speaks volumes to how pivotal it is to have that reliable piece on the back end. So I would agree with that. I think it's one of those things where I'm not necessarily saying that like Jimmie Ward is more important than Nick Bosa, because I think just having a top 5 edge player is probably the second most important thing in football outside of having a good quarterback. But you can absorb the loss of it a little bit better because of the depth you have behind it. The depth behind Jimmie Ward at the safety position isn't bad. It's just unproven on a level of Jimmie Ward has done it for almost a decade. We know what we're getting from him. You don't really know what you're going to get from a George Odom or a Hufanga or a Tarvarius Moore if they were to be thrust into a prominent role like that.
Absolutely. And who knows, like, if that ever comes to fruition, like maybe one of these undrafted free agents ultimately wins a spot. And then he's working towards being the guy that plays next to Hufanga next season. So who knows? But I think Jordan and I clearly are on the same page with the importance of Jimmie Ward, what he brings to the table. Again, that's the enforcer, man. You got to put some respect on his name.
Yeah, honestly, I respect the whole going on Facebook, Instagram. Like, it's so funny. And people think that, like, oh, these guys get paid millions. Just ignore this stuff. Like, who cares, man? It's the same thing with Kevin Durant. People always make fun of Kevin Durant for, like, dude, if they want to spend their free time on Twitter clapping back at people, like, I think a lot of people are just, like, not expecting them, like, when they talk about a player like that, to come back at them. They see all this. You guys would be surprised at how much players see you talking about them on Twitter, into whatever your social media platform is. They see all of this. And honestly, I respect it. Like, I respect anybody who wants to tune out the noise. But if you're feeling like the disrespect is at a level where you're going to come in and I thought Jimmie Ward, like that Facebook post, he did it in a very respectful way. He didn't attack the other person. He didn't call him names. He just said, hey, man, this is what I think you're not seeing there. And I have a lot of respect for that because, again, at the end of the day, part of what makes sports so fun is the ability to expand on your understanding of a given sport or a game. And I think that Jimmie Ward taking that avenue instead of just saying that the guy doesn't know anything to put some respect on his name or some, veiled
just
comment.
calling him a bum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he came out and he was very respectful and he laid out what, I think the guy maybe was missing with his evaluation of him. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. In fact, I encourage it. I think it's great because any opportunity to get better and learn this stuff is a win in my book. I try to do that every single day when I'm doing this. And I think that an NFL player giving you insight into what they're doing is the best possible way you can learn that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't mind the 40. I don't mind players coming out at all. And again, kind of like Jimmie Ward is doing, presenting context, things like that. And it's crystal clear. These guys see it all. Like whether it's in IG comments, Facebook comments, on Twitter. I mean, they're searching their names on Twitter. We've heard also many stories about how family members search their loved ones' names on Twitter, then they're sending them links to tweets, articles, all that type of stuff. You can't get away from it in today's age, right? It's there. So we, in my 4 years of doing what I do, we have a very active fan base, but they're very particular. They like to chirp their own players. Not everyone, but there is a very small subsection, but active subsection that loves to chirp the guys, and they hear it, they feel it. I feel like it adds a little bit of a grudge, a little bit of a chip onto their shoulder. But hey, it is what it is, and hey, might make them play a little bit harder ultimately in the long run. But again, what did you make of his particular comments, kind of alluding to potentially going to free agency? Sounds like a contract discussion or contract extension was something that I think a lot of people, including myself, kind of thought could be coming for Ward to maybe free up some money while simultaneously extending him. Does it kind of feel like he might be headed for free agency this year and maybe that contract extension isn't coming?
I mean, I think again, it all comes back to just the fact that these guys play this game for a very short amount of time in the grand scheme of things. And I will always be pro player securing financial security for themselves, their family, whatever their personal endeavors are. That comes first because at the end of the day, 49ers are going to be making money. Every team in the NFL is going to be making money. And I think without the players, there is no product. And I think what happens is, and I understand this from a standpoint of like somebody who's just looking at this as a fan simply, where like, I don't care about the individual. I care about the logo. That's what you always hear, right? I don't care about the name on the back of the jersey. I care about the name on the front. Well, at the end of the day, the guys need to get paid if you want to have that kind of culture and camaraderie that the 49ers have built. And the 49ers have done a good job of doing that. They've rewarded guys like Kittle. They've rewarded guys like Armstead, Fred Warner. I think we're going to see very shortly here in the coming weeks, Deebo Samuel get that contract extension as well. So these things tend to sort themselves out usually, but I hate this like narrative that a guy wants money and all of a sudden he's like greedy and we'll let him go somewhere.
Like a bad guy.
You don't want to be compensated for the work you do. I don't know about you guys. I like,
and it's no fans have any like financial stake in the money given.
Yeah, and that's the funniest thing to me too. Is it's pocket watching. And to be honest with you, grown men pocket watching, grown adults pocket watching is something I can never get behind. So, yeah, hey, I don't blame him at all. And I don't think he was taking a shot at the 49ers necessarily. I think he was taking a shot, again, at people who want to have very loud opinions without putting in the work to understand the gravity of how important a player like Jimmie Ward is. And I think what he was saying is the market's going to tell you what I'm worth. I can sit here and tell you what I'm worth, but dollars talk. And when I get paid and when my value goes up, when I hit the open market, should that happen, that's what I felt kind of like his comments were kind of hinting at. And again, I have no problem with that because I would not like somebody coming and telling me I'm not bad at my job. And when I ask them why, they have no idea what I do for what, you know what I mean? Like that would rub me the wrong way. And if it's happening on 5 different social media platforms, 12 hours a day, like that's going to get old after a while. So yeah, I don't blame him at all, you know?
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, these guys' names is their brand. So You got to protect the brand at all costs. Let's transition a little bit into the story that has taken hold of 49ers land over essentially the course of the offseason. Uh, the Trey Lance arm fatigue or lack thereof. Obviously, we've all heard the reports from Colin Cowherd, Mike Silver, both of them hearing the same thing, that Trey Lance has arm fatigue. Colin Cowherd went as far to say Trey Lance had to set out practices because of arm fatigue. We got Ted Nguyen of The Athletic, who said he spoke to a 49ers coach who knocked down the talk that Trey Lance is struggling with arm fatigue. First of all, have you ever heard of arm fatigue or arm fitness when it's come to a quarterback? I know you're big into the pre-draft process. You're big into scouting and evaluating. There's a lot of keywords and buzzwords that goes into these types of things. I've never heard this. Have you before this season has started? Is this new for you?
Never. The only time I've ever heard anything like that is like when people reference like dead arms for like a pitcher in baseball, which
Right.
is a different range of motion than throwing a football. So yeah, I thought it was a little odd. Mike Silver's been doing this for a very long time. Colin Cowherd's been doing this for a very long time. I don't think they just up and made it up out of thin air. But I do wonder where the sources came from, how reliable they might have been in the grand scheme of things. Again, like I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, it's just total BS. They made that up, because I don't think either of those guys would do that. I respect their work and the integrity behind their work, and I don't think that they would be in this business for as long as they have been if they were just making up stories to get attention when the news cycle's slow. Right. But I also don't really understand the whole arm fatigue thing, and ultimately it's one of those things where, I know it's a topic you'd like to talk about, but for me, I'm just kind of like, I really don't care, dude. Training camp starts in 3 weeks. Like, we'll see what happens. If his arm doesn't look good throwing the football, maybe we can revisit it then. But it's just something where I really think it's just noise in a time where there's so much of a, vacuum for any kind of football news. We're sitting here right now. The only thing really going on is like baseball and like the tail end of NBA free agency. So I think people on these nationally syndicated talk shows, and like Colin Cowherd has an audience of millions of people, they're looking for kind of anything they can that can drive, content. And again, while I'm not saying he made it up out of nowhere, I just wonder if this is something that would be a discussion in the middle of October in the heart of football season. You know what I mean? Like, that's where I'm kind of like wondering about the timing of things. But
yeah, it definitely feels like a situation where Baker Mayfield news hits. I even saw people like Mina Kimes, like, thank you, football gods, for the content, like, and blessing us with this, because we're in the dry period where all these players are working out, they're getting ready for training camp. So there's no free agency. All the moves, for the most part, have been pretty much made. Clearly, the last dominoes are falling in the quarterback carousel, and you got the big one that drops with Baker. So what else is there to talk about? Well, hey, remember a couple months ago when that one particular analyst for CBS mentioned that Trey Lance had arm fitness issues and the entire 49ers fan base was up in arms about it? Well, hey, maybe let's bring that back up and get it recycled, get it re-going. And hey, here we are talking about it. So based on what I'm hearing, again, you were at training camp all of last year. There was no real indication, at least, that showed in preseason. Again, he played almost the entire game against the Raiders, played almost the entire game against the Chiefs. We've seen him in action, full game against the Cardinals. We saw him at the end of the year. There's nothing that would indicate that he has a tired arm, and that could only be coming out of practice, right? And there are beat reporters every day at practice, so just feels like a weird situation, right?
yeah, like so for anybody who's played baseball, like maybe you've experienced it. Like I've had issues with like my shoulder, like my throwing shoulder, like my labrum back here. I'm not a doc. I could be off with just this kind of area, like things like that, or like your elbow's a little bit sore or something like that. But I feel like those are things that could be specified very easily, and that's where it's weird for me. Like, it's not like we're hearing that he has like a tendon that's a little bit, sore or tender after throwing a ton, or like a problem with his elbow or his UCL or something like that. It's just worded as arm fatigue or like arm fitness. Like, just the whole phrasing, like arm fitness, just like doesn't really make sense to me. And like part of what is so appealing about Trey Lance is his ability to literally have a rocket launcher for a right arm.
Fitness.
Like, yeah. So again, it doesn't make sense to me. And it's one of those things where, I understand that certain things need to be talked about and sometimes it's slow. I personally just try to abstain from really diving deep into these kind of arguments and conversations. Because again, it's something to me that if we just patiently wait a month or so, it will be sorted out once the, bullets start flying in training camp and you start actually seeing these live reps and you start seeing these, this arm in action outside of training camp and workouts and stuff like that. But again, that's something where I don't think it just would have developed over the last year. And the amount of resources that get put into any draft pick, let alone a top 3 draft pick that you invested 3 years worth of first round picks into, I feel like that would have come up as a medical red flag at a certain point. If it was like, hey, this guy's pretty talented, but by the way, he has arm fitness issues. Like, that's something that would have came up if it was a real thing to me. So I don't really know what to make of it. I think maybe it could just be something like, this is my hypothetical. I'm not sure. I think it's something where maybe it was about like the mechanics, and the altering of mechanics maybe led to a little bit of soreness after throwing possibly, or some adjustment period.
I agree, because if you're changing the way you're throwing, you're engaging different muscles or different tendons that maybe you don't rely on, because when you're talking about muscle memory, right, growing up, there's a natural ability, but when you're trying to change it and tweak it, you could put strain on tendons or muscles or joints that maybe you haven't. So I agree with you. I've thought about that as well. That could be a thing.
And it's funny to me because it's like it gets worded as this thing that's like an irreplaceable fix. And if it is what we were just like talking about, then it's something that will naturally sort itself out the more reps you get with your new throwing motion and your new improvised mechanics. So it's just kind of like one of these things where it's like, it's not like he has this like chronic injury that's never going to go away. It's just like, it's I don't know what to make of it, dude. Again, like arm fitness, I don't know. Like, what are we doing? Like,
what are we talking about? Like, no, 100%. Like, it's just one of those things. Like, arm fitness to me, like, again, it's such a broad term, a term we've never heard before. We've had to ask these people what it means. Like, you think of fitness, you think of like, is he out of shape? Like, what does that even mean? So anyways, Nicholas, appreciate the $10 super chat. He's got a theory here. Maybe it has something to do with the personal relations between Lance and Coward. Maybe Coward's disgruntled. Who knows? That I don't know. It's hard to say, especially for someone who's so professional like Coward. Like, I get it. His voice is his living. So I don't know. It feels hard to totally make that conclusion, but you never know. Corey says Purdue invented break through the pain to sell more meds. Someone made up arm fatigue to have something to talk about. I feel like Corey's is pretty accurate, right? Like, it just kind of feels like that's where we are in the offseason. Obviously, the Trey Lance narratives have been a hot button. Gets clicks, gets views, gets us talking about it. Could be. So, like you said, though, we ultimately won't know until training camp or throughout the season or, halfway through the playoffs if the 49ers are lucky enough to get there. That it just feels like, to your point, it's a total wait and see situation, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's the point too where it's like, I'm never going to sit here and be like critical of somebody like Mike Silver, Colin Coward, who's been established in this business for a long time. And again, you get connections by doing this kind of work over a long period of time. So who am I to sit here and say that they're making this up or they're lying or it's not factual? I also just think it's something that, again, it will reveal itself. And if maybe he has some issues throwing the ball in the next couple months, it's something that gets validated. And if not, it's something that I doubt any of us really care about a couple months from now. So it comes back to how you choose to spend your time during the off season. And I'll be honest, like for me, like I still have a certain, amount of articles I have to pump out every week I have obligations, and it's been harder the last couple months because after the draft ended and after all the the breakdowns, walkthroughs for the players, like there's not really much to talk about in the middle of July before training camp. So everybody kind of goes a different way, and I'm in my lane. And if somebody else is doing something in their lane that doesn't really make sense, that's their thing. I'm not going to sit here and be critical of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. My guy's about that action, boss. So he's gonna get his work done. Tell the good people where they can find more of your work.
NinersNation.com, man. Go and head over there. We got stuff coming out pretty much every day over there. It's a fantastic team there. I'm working on something right now that's the 10 most impressive individual performances from last season. So I'm trying to kind of shine some light on some of these individual. And it's the cool thing about it is I think I'm on number 5 now. So number 6 just went out today. Go check it out. It might surprise some of you who it was, but a couple of the players who made the list, it was from games where the 49ers didn't win. Like I had 2 guys from Seattle. It was Al-Shaair and DJ Jones. And it was it's a way to appreciate, even though they didn't win the football game. And I understand that's what people ultimately want. With enough time going by, you can go back and look at some of these games and really appreciate what went into those performances. And even though they didn't ultimately win, these guys were the reason they had a chance in those games. So basically what I'm doing is I'm kind of weighing like the impact of the game. The statistics do matter too, like how they ended up finishing these games. And then what I saw on film, and did it hold up today in July 2022 the same way it did for me when I watched the Monday after that game back in fall of 2021. So that's what I'm working on now. And again, that's where it's like, hey, I'm just trying to find something to fill the airspace until training camp starts. So, in the meantime, that's what I'm working on. If anybody wants to check it out, I'll throw it out there because people, might not get a chance to talk about him for much longer. We'll see how it goes. But the one today was about Jimmy Garoppolo against the Rams in week 10. And if you go back and read the article, if you have time, what I broke down was he statistically, I think he was like 15 and 19 for 185, 2 touchdowns and no picks, which may not jump out at the screen at you, but I went down and I included cut-ups in my article that showed how good he was. I think he was like 7 and 9 for like 130 yards on 3rd and 4th down in that game. And some of these balls he was throwing in this game were just put into perfect spots. So it's kind of a way for me to kind of go back and rehash the 2021 season, find some positive things, and just kind of, run the clock out until we get to training camp. And that's when we'll really start getting some hard hitting analysis.
Absolutely. That's where we're all out. Here's the article from Jordan. There are the clips, everything, all the analysis. Make sure you go check it out. My boy, damn, you're detailed here, my guy.
Yeah, dude. I was up till like 2 a.m. working on that one last night. Sometimes when I get into these, I'm very, and I have a list that if you go to the bottom there, you can see all those are the previous ones that I wrote too. So if you click on those, the links should take you straight to the articles. And like I said, it's just what I'm working on now. And when training camp starts, I definitely will have some more in-depth stuff. I will have updates every day from training camp. I try to do an article for every practice I attend. And we'll see how it goes. But that's just kind of, like I said, middle of July, man. I'm just being real. There's not really much to talk about, and I don't like manufacturing controversy out of nowhere. That's not really my style personally. So that's
you mean you're not going to replace Colin Cowherd one day? You're not going to step into the herd role and take on those hot take specialist roles?
I don't think those are big shoes to fill. I'll be honest, and I don't know if that's necessarily the avenue I'm going for. I respect his work, but yeah, I just personally, it comes back to what I was saying earlier. I respect everybody's right to have an opinion. That's what makes talking about sports so fun. But like the whole arm fatigue thing, I don't have sources like that within the 49ers organization. So I'm not going to say, hey, Colin Cowherd lied and made this up. That's for other people to worry about. I'm just going to sit here and grind tape from 2021. And if you want to read about it, go to Niners Nation and it'll be there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jordan, for joining me as usual. I'm excited, though, to get to training camp because that's where the real football starts. Obviously, doing our best to bring as much 49ers content as possible. Coach says, Jordan, if you ever need help writing, get at him. Coach is ready. Coach is ready to start his own channel. He's ready to start writing. He's ready to get into the content game. He's chomping at the bit.
Yeah, I was gonna say I've taken a unfortunately long hiatus from my own YouTube stuff, but as soon as I get it back up and running, which is probably around training camp, I definitely will reach out to you, Coach, because I'd love to have you on. Hopefully, I know Brad's a very busy guy. I can get him on my side.
No, I still got to get the boy on. But it's going to be a good time. Training camp, I mean, it's going to be here before we know it. I mean, it's already July 8th. I think someone had asked earlier, any word on the open training camp for the public? I don't think we've gotten official word from the 49ers. I believe camp players report on the 26th of July. And I believe somewhere in that window, whether it's 27th, 28th, 29th, kind of around there, it's typically when they'll open it up to the public. But of course, if you're following me on any of my channels, whether it's Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, we will obviously be reporting on it when it comes out. So just keep an eye out and we'll let you know when the official word comes down. But until then, Jordan, you have a phenomenal weekend along with the rest of the SDS. We thank you guys as always tuning in. We're so close to real football instead of talking about manufactured storylines at this point.
So yeah, I'm not gonna lie, dude. It's been nice the last like week or so. I'm starting to get back into like kind of cracking the bones and muscles and stretching again, getting back into grinding film.
To get that fitness back, that right.
Yeah, exactly. This off-season fatigue was catching up with me, but I'm not gonna lie, I could like feel it coming, you know what I mean? Like there's this like sense of excitement where I'm like, oh man, football is like right around the corner. I love all sports, man, but there's just something different when football season hits and you can like feel it in the air now.
It really, there's the buzz going. There's really a buzz, and we are getting close. And the drought will be over soon. I promise you. It will be over soon. And Jordan and I will be in the middle of it all. So again, thank you everyone for tapping in. Make sure you stay locked in. Make sure you're following Jordan, his work on Niners Nation. You can follow him at J. Lee Elliott on Twitter. The dude's pumping out like he said, he's sitting back, he's grinding tape, posting clips like a son of a gun. So make sure you go tap in. But again, thank you, Jordan. Thank you to all the SDS, and you guys have a great weekend. We'll most likely be back on Monday. So until then, y'all